these days, to tune into the news is to tune into The Reckoning. The Reckoning is a title of a series of essays that was printed in the Times magazine, where women were sharing the story exposing men's violence against them. And even as this reckoning pours through many media outlets right now, as it blasts through the silence of our status quo, we also hear too many pundits saying this last week before the election in Alabama, how will the alleged allegations against Roy Moore affect the women voters? As if men could care less about women and children's bodies. We've heard too much this fall, men credentialing their disdain for sexual violence as a father, as a husband, as if you're not those things, you also could care less about women and children's bodies. And then there's this. On the afternoon before the special election of an alleged pedophile and sexual abuser for the U.S. Senate, our president said this. A recorded robocall message that was sent around to voters in Alabama. I need Alabama to go vote for Roy Moore. It's so important. I'm going to make America safer and stronger and better than ever before. But we need this seat. We need Roy voting for us. The president urging us to vote for an alleged unrepentant sexual predator that will make us safer and stronger and better? Really? We live in times where this reckoning of marginalized voices are breaking through the silence of life as we've known it, and we're living in times that are also crazy-making, where we're told that things that are happening in plain sight are not happening, or worse, they just don't even matter. And so when I heard this robocall message on Monday in my car as I was driving to my local clergy group, when I arrived, I walked in the room and said, "Can I please lead the meeting? I think I have a topic for us today. I got something." And it might not be what you think, because I asked, what is holding you together right now? What is the theological foundation that helps you stand in front of your people with something to say? What's giving you some belief in the goodness of life and of people? What's giving you meaning to hold on to that you can just keep it together as a person as we face this reckoning of sexual violence, its beauty and its disregard of women's bodies? Because I ask myself this like every day. As you just listen and the news reporter goes on to the next story, it's like, ah! And much to my disappointment, my group asked me to answer first. It's obvious why I asked them, right? I didn't have a good answer. I had no answer to hold it all together. And I thought I really needed one because you might show up here today and expect me to preach about it. Preach about hope in the dark. And so I entered that group dissatisfied with my answer, and I left that group still dissatisfied with my answer. And so I kept wrestling with the question like I've done decade after decade of my life. Wrestling with life's meaning, wrestling with the nature of humanity, with our hurts and how we hurt one another, and how we deliver intricate, delicate, beautiful sources of compassion and love for one another. How do you reconcile? How do we hold this with some meaning? A writer once said, "Success is a little like wrestling a gorilla. You don't quit when you're tired, you quit when the gorilla is tired." And in my experience, life has never been too tired to stop wrestling with me and meaning. And if only there was just one gorilla that we were wrestling, right? in life. Some of the gorillas on the mat with many of us these days seem to be hope. Like, is there hope? Is there not hope? Is there hope? Is there not hope? I don't know, but you know who's right behind hope? Just willing to be there constantly, relentlessly? Despair. Just pushing in to say, well, if it's not enough for you to wrestle with hope, I got something for you. And then, what's really annoying to me is not only is there hope and despair, and then there's fear lurking, like waiting to be tagged in, but also underneath is this nagging, silly, annoying gorilla who's trying to pull you down from underneath, and its name is powerlessness. As people of faith, people who have faith in the worthiness of life, we support one another to stay on the mat. Like, you go, don't give up, you can't quit. You can't quit, you gotta stay there. You gotta stay and keep wrestling and don't give in. We support one another to stay on the mat and wrestle the gorillas so that we don't sever that bright thread of hope that's been handed to us that we can tend and pass on to the next generation. We come here on Sundays to keep the flickers of light in the dark going as long as it's ours to tend. This is often easy to do when we're in relationship with one another. Being with each other can bring this greater appreciation and understanding of the power of love, of forgiveness, of hope that people demonstrate by their own actions and how they choose to live their life no matter what gorilla is sitting on their head, right? And it's also sometimes not easy to keep a flame of light flickering when we're in relationship with people. And we experience the complexity, the pain, the woundedness, the suffering that we inflict on ourselves and one another. The challenging situations where it seems like the light is utterly absent. But that pain and lack of well-being and okayness we may feel in our life doesn't mean that hope left the mat and that despair is the only one. The lack of a sense of okayness with what is happening around us can sometimes be our greatest strength. It's a calling, not to despair, but to say, this isn't okay. What's happening right now is not okay. There's so much loss. There's so much suffering. It doesn't have to be this way. Something can change. It's actually like you tagged hope. Doesn't it sound like that? I may not often name it as hope and think of that gorilla. I think I wrestle with this with my clergy on Monday, thinking I'm supposed to be a hopeful person because I'm a minister. But I don't think of myself as a hopeful person. And in that moment, what I realized is that sometimes when the gorilla that's right up in your face, I think it's hope, and I'm wrestling with what's going to even make a difference these days, it's not so much that it's hope or even despair that's right there so close I can't see anything else. It's grief. It's grief. It's sadness that this beauty of life just gets squashed. That flicker of light that other people carry sometimes just gets put out. And the sadness, the grief that we feel that says this could be otherwise. That's not hopelessness. That's an emotion that is a big, hard gorilla that doesn't give up with us until it's tired. And when we step back from the mat sometimes and we can actually consider, what is the gorilla I'm actually wrestling with? We may find it's not the one we thought. And we can see that actually, they're all gorillas. They share DNA. They're related. They're not so independent. Sometimes they're on our side. Sometimes they're not. It's hard to tell when you're wrestling exactly what's going on. Rebecca Solnit wrote that sometimes people consider any tragedy as a fatal blow against hope, as though hope is a contract, a guarantee, not a belief in slender possibilities that sometimes maybe bear a little fruit. She writes, "The record shows that miracles are frequent, but perfection is never attained. Hope can be an attachment to a specific outcome, but the future is unknown and uncertain. And hope is just the experience and belief that you do have some power to act in the world, that the current set of affairs is not inevitable, that all trajectories are not downhill." Thank God. Woo! Because being hopeful doesn't have to be focused on outcomes. It doesn't mean we have to live with the assurance that, everything's going to work out in the end. There's a larger plan. Justice will inevitably win. No, we just have to have hope that life right here is worthwhile and worth caring for. Here's an image that speaks to that for me. A colleague shared this a few years ago, and it's continued to stay with me. He said, we tend to talk in our faith about the moral arc of the universe, that it's long, but it bends towards justice. He said, but when we think of the moral arc that way, we completely ignore the fact that many people experience it more like a tsunami, where the moral arc of the universe is actually crashing down onto their lives. It's not flowing this way and they experience it like that. It's just pummeling them and they're trying to survive. I find that incredibly hopeful, and here's how. If the moral arc is long and it's my job to lasso the moral arc of the universe and pull it down for my whole life, that stinks. That's really hard, right? Or if I just go, I give up, I can't do it anymore, hopefully that group over there can hook it, because my aim's not so good, I don't always know where to throw it, and I haven't been successful at bending the arc of the universe. No, all we have to do is in this moment, if it's a tsunami and it's coming this way, all we have to do is be responsive to it, to choose how does that water hit us. Being hopeful is about choosing love and life as it hits us. It's about choosing, not knowing where it's going to go or what's going to happen. It's about letting go of all of that and just in this moment, just what matters to me and how do I live from that place. It's about choosing the most alive, the most freeing, the most generative, creative possibility, which is often the most frightening one. It feels most alive, right? To choose that in the moment and just have enough hope that when we choose that, it actually makes a difference in our lives and maybe even in someone else's. But when we choose that, we find more love and more meaning. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a minister and I had to come up with something to say today, even if that's how it started. I'm saying this because I'm alive, and experience teaches me that it feels good when I choose life and love. And even if I never preached again, I would continue to choose life, and not perfectly and not in every moment. But it's not about perfection. It's about showing up. I would choose life and love as much as I possibly can because I can't stand the alternative. I don't want to be pummeled in that wave. I want to find ways to float. I want to find ways to stand. I invited Sandy Wyatt to share some of her stories with us this morning because she is a kindred spirit and she knows how to surf the tsunami. She is a ninja and a superhero. If you see that in your order of service, that was intentional. She is a superhero. She's going to share with us some of her experience about choosing hope, about following the flickers in the dark. Let's be people who do that. Let's be people who tend the light of hope no matter what. That we say with our actions that the life we hold right now, even right now, with all of its brokenness and messiness and reckoning and crazy making, is still worthwhile. And that the bright thread of hope that we choose to weave can show up around the empty or hard spaces in our life to create these beautiful doilies that is the life that we live. Amen.